So everyone got the solo order. It's going to start with trombone. We're just going to make a horseshoe around here. We're going to end with bass. Um, After me, she's going to set it up, and we're going to read it down. All right, so right from letter A, maybe? Whenever he's plugged in and ready to go.
Doors up. Would you like to play a melody out so we can get the tag?
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Yeah, from A all the way out. Sounds great. Everyone ready?
Perfect.
All right. 2, 3, 4. That's it. Well, thank you for all coming and listening to our rehearsal. We're just meeting each other, and this is a new piece that I just prepared for today, so you get to hear us putting it together. Yeah.
How's it working there? All right?
I'm getting the bass.
Maybe that's what it is. It's in the monitor. Oh, so do we want anything in the monitor? I don't think we're fine. I don't even need mine, but that's okay. You get it? Would you like us all here to start?
I'll call you guys out because it could be about 5 to 10 minutes. I just want to do a little introduction, get to know everyone. Sounds great.
You ready?
Ready?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody online. Thank you for being here. Let your friends know we're here. Come on out and hang out. Hopefully you'll bring your instruments and get up and have a chance to play with us a little bit later on. My name's Jason. I'm from the Office of Global Initiatives here at Berkeley. And this afternoon, my colleague Jeff Perry, who's the Associate Director of Summer Programs, and I have the privilege of bringing a friend, an amazing composer and bassist and producer here to Berkeley to hang out with us for a couple of days. To talk about what we all love doing, which is just playing music and being creative and being spontaneous. And this is a great place to do it. It's a safe place to do it. And it's great to just get your friends together and, you know, break out your music, see what happens. So Kurt is somebody that I've had the opportunity to have lots of really interesting conversations with about what's going on in the world of music and what we all do as players and writers. And he's got some thoughts on that today, and I think he's going to want to hear from you as well. So there's going to be lots of audience participation involved. And please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Kurt Morgan.
Well, thank you for that, Jason. Thank you to Berkeley for having me. It's really an honor for me. When I went to high school, I grew up not too far from here, Westerly, Rhode Island. So, the Berkeley College of Music Jazz competition, big band competition, was something that my high school worked for hard every year for the experience. We would show up early and to school and practice for months leading up to it. So it's a real honor for me to be on the stage to talk to all of you and to be in this position to do it. So thanks for having me. Thank you all for coming. One of the things that I'm most interested in as a musician, for those of you that don't know, I'm a bass player. It's my main profession. It's how I make a living, is as a bass player. And my gig now is with Dweezil Zappa. And I've been with him for 6 years now. And for me, this is a dream come true. As a high school student, when I first discovered Zappa's music, it really did change a lot of things for me. So when I look back on my musical career and I think about where I'm at now on this stage, it's a bit overwhelming. It feels like, for me, to be playing my hero's music is a dream come true. And I never, although I wished it would happen, I guess I never thought it really would, but here I am. And I'm here to tell you that if you have those feelings of maybe one day I could do it, I'm telling you right now that you can. And my particular experience, to me, feels a bit on a side road. I went to college at the University of New Hampshire and studied music theory and composition. That was my. I wanted to learn how music worked, and while I love to play, the real dream for me was to be able to realize myself as a composer, to find my unique voice, whatever that was. Whether you enjoy Frank Zappa's music or not is irrelevant right now, because to me, he represents a very unique perspective on music. Let's just put it that way. So I admired his uniqueness and wanted to find my own. And it was hard, really hard. So maybe in the back of my mind, I imagined that, what are you looking for? It's already there. You have a personality. It's just waiting for you. It wants to come out. You don't have to look anywhere for it. It's with you every day. But even though you may think that, to actually believe it and put it into action, it can be a real challenge. So one of my goals today is to maybe share with you some of the things that have worked for me, just to give you some ideas. I really would like to encourage those of you that are interested in composing your own music, and specifically to find your unique place in that, and to be proud of it. Then I hope to take some of that anxiety away, or at least give you a few suggestions of areas that you might be able to go and try. Now, everything that I tell you today is just an opinion and what works for me. So really, if some of this doesn't make sense, you just leave it, and hopefully there's one little nugget in here that works for you. So, just out of curiosity, out of the audience here, how many of you are interested in composing your own music? Fantastic. Now, how many of you have tried and struggled with maybe knowing where to go next? Maybe specifically, how many of you have a lot of little pieces that you would like to make bigger? By a show of hands, does anyone understand this experience? Yes, hello, it's so common. This sort of feeling. Now, I'm 41 now, and I went to school expecting to come out of it seasoned, like a seasoned composer. It took much longer for me to allow myself. I think that's a lot of it, is allowing yourself to take chances and fail and learn from those things. It can be a really scary thing, but it doesn't need to be. Because chances are the people that you admire, the artists and musicians that you admire are intimately familiar with this feeling, and they've found their own solutions to these issues. So what I'd like to do today is present to you, like the piece that you heard us rehearsing, is something that I wrote very quickly for this presentation. And after we play it, I'd like you to listen to the whole thing and make some mental notes about the way it feels to you, and maybe try to take a guess at how I might have put this together. And then after we're done playing, I'll tell you some of these things. And we'll see how close you all are. I'm fascinated by it because I think there's no wrong answer to this. I'm asking you, how does it make you feel? So as long as you're telling me how you feel, there's no debate about this. There's no wrong answer for you, including it made me uncomfortable, I didn't like it, all of those things. That's okay, because there's, as you'll hear and have probably heard, it's intentionally meant to rub a little bit. So, before I introduce our band and bring them out to play this, I just would like to make a dedication, if I might. There are many people in my career that have helped me, and really, there's two I'd like to mention today. The first is Gail Zappa. I'd like to thank her. This presentation is partly dedicated to her. And for those that are unfamiliar with me, before I played in Dweezil's band, I was the librarian for Frank Zappa's written manuscripts. So all of his orchestra music, his wife Gail hired me and trusted me to do that. And that's why I'd like to thank her now, because she took a chance on me. She sort of listened and took a chance. And that meant the world to me, to have someone to believe in me like that. And so it means a lot for me to be up here to pass some of that to you. So thank you, Gail. I'm here because of you. And the second is Clark Terry. I'm not sure if, does anyone who knows Clark Terry, is familiar with Clark Terry here? Okay, great. For those that don't know, Clark Terry was a fantastic jazz trumpet player and music educator. And he played with one of the few, possibly one of the only, to play with both Count Basie and Duke Ellington. So he comes from this tradition of jazz, and one of his passions was to pass that information along to young people. And my experience with Clark changed my life forever. When people talk of masters, I think often, we use the word awesome all the time. It's almost overused if you think about it. Because what if you have to reserve another word for something better than awesome? Leave some space for something even greater than what awesome is, and that's master is one of these words for me. Clark embodied that, and the way that he showed that to me was I performed with him once with my college jazz band. I went to University of New Hampshire, and I hadn't met him before, and he sat in with our big band, and we had, the song was the Meet the Flintstones, and it was at a tempo that I could barely keep up with. It was the fastest rhythm changes I think I've ever had someone throw at me. And I was on upright, and I'm much more comfortable on an electric guitar, so I was just nervous as could be. And he brought his drummer, Sylvia Cuenca, with him. So she was just on me, like ding, 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 you know, and I'm sweating bullets, like just trying to keep up. And we're in the middle of Clark's solo, and we get to the bridge, and he turns to Sylvia, the drummer, and he cuts her out. He's just, stop playing. So it's me and Clark, and I'm just like, just holding on for dear life. It really, I'm 18, and I just remember, just swing, man, just swing, you know? Digging in, playing all the hippest stuff I could come up with. And it just blew by. It's like over in a second, and I barely remember it. The band comes back in, we finish the song, great. I'm just happy that I didn't cause a train wreck. And at the end of the show, Clark was like, hey man, you know, nice job. And it was very casual. I was just really, I thought nothing of it. I was really just happy that I didn't cause a pileup. Now, flash forward 3 months after that concert, maybe more. It's the summertime and I'm at home and my phone rings and my father picks it up and he hands it to me. He's like, there's a guy named Clark Terry on the phone for you. And I was just like, oh, what are you talking about? He didn't know who he was. I had no idea. So I pick up the phone and I say, hello. He's like, hey, how you doing, Mr. Morgan? Hi, Clark. What can I do for you? He's like, how'd you like to play on a cruise with me and Oscar Peterson, Lou Donaldson? And he rattles off some of the biggest names in jazz. And I was a fan of jazz, but I didn't really think that I could hang with those guys. And I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. Now, it wasn't just that he asked me to do it. It was the fact that he remembered me, that he heard something that I didn't hear at the time. I didn't acknowledge, I didn't even know that I was capable of. Like I said, I was really just happy it didn't go to pieces. So this is what it means to me. He showed me what it meant to be a master, because I realized that I couldn't do that. I couldn't remember somebody's name. He remembered what I played, he remembered my name, and he remembered that, oh, I gotta come back to this kid. Now that was really humbling. I still have a way to go with that. But that's what I'm getting at here. So thank you, Clark. This is for you too. He was a fantastic educator, and he made it fun. He was so, the joy that came out of this man's horn and everything he said, the only other person that I could think of in that realm would be Louis Armstrong. Just this joy, he just radiated joy. The jazz had such a weight to it with a lot of other players that I loved. It was so serious, a lot of it. Here comes Clark, existing side by side, all of this, Mingus, Coltrane, just doing his thing, happy as can be. When you hear him scat, it's one of the funniest things in the world. He's known, they called him Mumbles. You know, Mumbles was one of his nicknames, and it's the funniest jazz scat you've ever heard. It's like but it's joy. So it's a huge lesson. Those two things that Clark taught me: listen and have fun, be sensitive. You know, he was a great person and an amazing musician. So, thanks, Clark. Okay. Now I'd like to bring out the band to play the song that I've entitled "Growing Elephant, Shrinking Room." So please come out here. I'd like to Thank my players out here. It's a fantastic band. I've Loli De La Rosa on guitar, Daniel Sky on trumpet, Zishi Liu on tenor, Jason Camilio trombone, Anastasia Petrova on keys, Ray Soul bass, there he is, and Ivana Cuesta on drums. Now, when we get to the solo section, since there's a stress on composition here, those of you that improvise, it is composition. So you'll be hearing the band compose a piece that I composed, and hopefully we all have a good time, and then we'll talk later. So enjoy.
for having the courage to sight read this. I mean, we all just met, and I threw some really weird stuff at him. So, thank you. And so, thank you. Thank you. Now that I've subjected you to that, does anyone have any clue what is going on there? Anything? Anything? How about with the chords? No one knows. No idea. Well, that's cool. To me, that's cool. That you're like, what the heck did I just hear? Well,
Potpourri.
a potpourri. All right, that's great. I'll take that. A potpourri. Now, sometimes, how many of you have like stared at a blank page and just been overwhelmed at the amount of choices? You know, this has happened to me just for about 20 years. You know, it can be really scary. So one of the methods that I've used to get something going is randomly picking ingredients. It's like, imagine that you had some mayonnaise, pickles, and like a plum in your refrigerator. And you need to make something tasty out of it. It's a challenge for sure, but the idea here is that we have so many choices, so many options available to us when we compose. It feels like an open field, you know. So one of the things that helps me is to restrict your choices. And this piece began with a 12-tone row. Is anyone not familiar with 12-tone music? Just how it basically operates, as everyone sort of understands how this works. So really, the idea of 12-tone music is that there isn't one pitch that is stronger than the others. They're all treated equally, all 12. Instead of a tonic, you get everybody equal. Now, there are strict rules, obviously, with that Schoenberg kind of perfected and invented and all of this, but I didn't use any of that. I chose just to start with the tone row. So it's a random tone row. And I split it in half, where I'm only dealing with the first 6 pitches, and then I deal with the other 6. So what you heard was, during most of that groove, you're dealing with only 6 pitches. And in order to hold it together in some way, because I knew that it was going to be challenging. When you use random things like that, there's a chance that you're going to get some unknown chords in there. You're going to get some really dissonant things. So it's a way of forcing yourself to deal with it. Now that first hexachord is what they're called. I lucked out. It ended up being kind of close to a scale. It ended up being like an F melodic minor without a C. So I just ran with it. The melody was only using those pitches. That's the only stipulation that I gave myself, and I knew that I'd like to give it some kind of rhythm to hold it all together. And I'll give you a look here, so you can see. Here we go. Okay. So, can everyone see this? Now you can see, here's the intro. Can everyone see up there? Okay. I've made it, group 1 is the first hexachord, right? Now I've transposed it for the B-flat instruments, but really these are, in C, this is what you're dealing with. These notes. Here's, let's see where the A starts. Now, let's look at the melody. That's just the intro. Now, there's really nothing special happening here. There's no formula that I'm using. All I wanted to do was give you something simple and solid
so that you could hear all of these really weird pitches. So that's why the groove is there, to balance this out. Here's the melody. All right. Now it's not transposed. You're looking at this in concert pitch here. So here we go. Here's this first statement. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Each pitch is used only once. And as you can see, there's one note that's at the top, and you have a shape to it. Over here, I'm using the same pitches. Now, like, there's no rules here. I just did what sounded good. And you can see that the lines happen in the second half of the measure. So I'm setting up this little thing. I'm just using these pitches. I'm creating shapes, really. I'm looking at the contour of the line, and then I play it back, and I go, I like it. Sounds good. Good enough. It goes on. There's some little rhythmic variation here, but there's all of the chords that happen are basically an accident. I'm really just going into the bag, grabbing a handful of those 6 pitches, and coming back out and seeing what I can make out of it. So that's the first A, that repeats. Basically have the rhythm section, I told her she could do whatever she wanted with just use those notes. Here's the B section, and here is where I'd like to get into how to expand your ideas. Now, this line comes in the guitar and organ. Can anyone tell me, is there a kind of a relationship that you notice or hear when you compare that guitar to what the tenor sax is doing? Can you see what's happening there?
Call and response.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's how it feels. It's a really good way of putting it. It's to the point. It's true, but really, literally, it's a retrograde of the whole tenor line. And now you can't see it because I've only got 2 bars at a time, but I didn't change a thing. Let's look at where it ends. Sorry, let's go down. I'm going to look at the last note on the trumpet. See, we have a G there on that forzando. I'm retrograding the rhythm and the pitches, exactly. Now that should, so the organ part should read G, F, A flat, right? There we go, G, F, A flat. That's it. Now, they sort of magically fit together like a puzzle piece that way, and that's, I was fortunate that happened. The way that when you say call and response, that was an accident. It was just a result, a happy accident, that this is part of what happens when you take random ingredients and you start messing with them. You get surprises. It's not like you're controlling every single note. You are dealing with a certain amount of limited material and you want to see if you can expand it. And this is one of the simplest ways of doing it. Now, I should probably talk into the microphone. Makes sense. Now that I mentioned retrograde, it's worth pointing out that you've all studied this in class. The 4 basic transformations are retrograde, inversion, and the prime, the original. Use them. They're really, really useful tools. And it's just a beginning, you know. It's a way of creating related material to what you have, and that's one of my goals. To me, to my ears, and your ears may be different, I like to hear something that has a very logical kind of linear flow to it. Not all the time, but it's an art and a craft that I'm interested in learning how to do. So that's one way of doing it. You limit yourself to a basic amount of ingredients and then start messing with it. You start flipping it around, and you get lucky sometimes. So the reason why it sounds like a call and response is because that first time I did it, all of those notes are on the second half of the bar. So when you reverse it, it ends up just complementing the other part, and it sort of magically worked. Now, the point is, I don't know what's going to happen. You have to take a chance and let it fly and see what happens. Now, I'd like to take a little detour here to let you see what some of the masters say about improvisation and composition. I'm going to start with Clark Terry, and one of his philosophies that I found incredibly useful is it's called imitate, assimilate, innovate. That is his 3-step process for making music. It's like you're learning how to speak when you're a kid. You start by imitation, and we all do this. It's like you find your artist, you start to copy. The assimilate part is when you make it your own. Innovate is when you push it further. It's the general idea. It's like a process. Now, I'd like to suggest that a lot of us spend a lot of time in the imitation phase, and that's okay. For me, it's always been, I've always recognized that I needed to get past the imitation phase. This is the part of the unique part of your voice that I'm interested in. I don't want to just sound like everyone else. It's inevitable. You're going to at some point. It's okay. And people may hear something in your playing and say, that sounds like so-and-so, and you've never heard that person before. And they could be right. You know, there's some kind of strange link to these things. So I'm saying it's okay. So let's start with what Clark has to say about it. And composition includes the improvisation. So let's go the other way. So any of you that improvise, I think this is going to be your connection to composing more music. I think composition on paper, or however you do it, and real-time improvisation is essentially the same process on a different time scale. You have time to make decisions when you're not improvising on paper, but essentially it's the same thing. You really want to keep that flow going as if you were playing an improvised solo, as if you were speaking to someone. That's often where you don't know where the next idea comes from. That's when we kind of stop ourselves. So here's what Clark has to say about some of this.
It's no
I'm
disgrace
gonna
for
get
any kid.
this over here. Pardon me. Pardon the tiny.
It's no disgrace for any kid today to copy what his idols
did.
Yeah,
Right.
what they did. And so that was one way of getting involved. Then after a certain point, you say, well, hey, wonder why, when you get to a certain, wonder why they make a right turn there. I'm going to see what happens if I make a left turn. And then you are getting into innovation.
There you go, basic, right? This is a good one. Now, here's his advice to young players. Now, let's see if this makes sense to anyone.
Most young players, when they start, they try to show you how much they know in one measure. The kid comes up and he gets up to play a solo like that. He only plays as many notes as he can play. We always have to have them realize what Count Basie was all about. Getting involved in the utilization of space and time. He came by this through the medium of his life in Kansas City, in the little clubs called the Cherry Blossom, he knew everybody who came in there, and everybody who came in there knew him. So they would always, on every table almost in that joint, there was a drink for Count Basie. They're playing and they go, ba-doom, doom, 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 doom. And so he's like, bleep, bleep, diddy. He looks up and says, hey, that's old Joe over there. He goes, hey, Joe, how you doing? And meanwhile, the band is still pumping like, ba-doom, doom, doom, doom. So he's utilizing that space, you know, in time. Goes over and has a little taste with Joe, and he comes back and says, blimp-be-doo, blimp, and he says, hey, that's old Tom over there. He goes over to Tom's table, has a little taste with Tom, you know, comes back, be-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Meanwhile, the band is still carrying it right on, you know. So this is something that we have to really instill in the minds of our kids today. Not try to get up and play on the first chorus or the first measure of your solo, everything, you know.
I think you get the point. So, now, does anybody here have a fragment of a piece that they're working on that they don't know what to do with next? Is there anyone brave in the audience that would like to come up here and have the band maybe help you go to the next step? Is there anyone that has something here? This gentleman here? Yeah? Please come up. Please come up. And bring your instrument, and if I could get some of the guys and the gals in the band, if you're up for it, maybe just let's see, the rhythm section, if possible. Thank you very much. And what's your name, sir?
My name's Ashray.
Ashray? Pleasure. Well, thank you for being the brave one to come up here and show us what you got, man. It's I can't say that I would have been as brave as you in school. So, thank you. Oh, that's good. No, it's good. It's good. We can just use her. Yeah. So, can you tell me a little bit about what you have here?
Okay, so there's this like one thing I've been working on with some friends at my school,
Yeah.
and it starts out with one bar of 13/8 and then one bar of 7/4,
Yeah.
then another bar of 13/8 and 7/4, and then 13/8 and then 4/4, and then the rest is in 4/4.
Okay. And now, what would you say? Because this is going to be a challenge to throw this kind of thing at somebody without hearing it. So I'm putting everyone on the spot here. So it's okay. We're all the chance of failure is what makes these things exciting. So I'm that's why he's a brave guy. So what would you say? You just don't know where to go next.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like I feel like I'm trying too much to be like, I don't know, Greg Howe or
Okay.
any other fusion dude.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, so is there? Can you just play solo what you have, so we take the heat off, so we can all hear it, and let's see what you have here.
It's on stack.
Is it on standby? Yeah. No drive?
A little bit, I think.
All right, you get it there. man. I mean, come on. Great, really great. Okay. Now I'm just going to give you my cold read here. Like I'm just going to tell you what it made me feel. Right? You have two really contrasting ideas, which is fine. It's actually cool. You know, to me for me to hear this first thing that you presented in 13 and how does it go 13 and 4?
8, 7, 4.
Yeah. Okay. Let's add that 13, 8, and 7, 4. I mean, we're what is this? 27 eighth notes. Yeah. It's tricky, man. But even still, I'm not going to put you through it just to try, because it would take too much time. And that's not a dig, man. It's because you really work that out, and it's complicated. You know, rhythmically, it's challenging for someone to just pick this up. So, but what I commend you for is the beginning idea, that A part. Even though it's odd time, it made sense to me. It had some kind of speech phrase structure to it, which is a good thing to start with. Like we talk about it all the time. It should be like, there are a lot of parallels to music and speech. They're not exactly the same, but a lot of these things come from speech. So it felt good to me. I mean, when you first told me about it, I was expecting, oh man, how am I gonna follow this, you know? But it made sense. So I don't think there's anything wrong with any of that. I think it's great, you know? The second part, it's the feel of it is such a contrast that now you're left with these two pieces that it's like they're opposites or something. It's like they're just somehow, it's almost as if they shouldn't be together, but they are. And that's okay. Now, I just would use the ideas that you've presented, and through some kind of repetition, bringing the first idea back. I wouldn't necessarily introduce another idea, although you could, you know? This is just my opinion on this. In order to make those things feel like they should be there, repetition.
Okay.
Yeah, repetition. This is why that Growing Elephant song at the beginning had so much repetition in it. It's because I knew that the pitch material was going to be a bit challenging, especially when we got to that second half. It just felt so strange, so I wanted to give you something solid to hold on to, and repetition is the key to all of that. You hear everything. So, after that second part seems a bit longer than the first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the style.
Right.
How
yeah.
would you describe the style of that second part?
So like the first part, I was like really inspired by Greg Howe, and then I came across a guitarist named Kevin Eckness.
Yeah.
And he plays like sort of country plus jazz.
Yeah. I heard this. It's kind of like Nashville, this flat picking kind of thing happening with this other alien beginning, which is cool. You know, we've never really put those things together in a sandwich. So now, let's see. Can you draw a line from what was the inspiration for the first part?
Greg Howe.
Greg Howe. Okay.
Or just dominant pentatonic scale.
Sure.
That still.
Okay. I think, and I won't make you do this on stage. I'm just kind of like, it's sort of like a consultation on stage, you know, with people kind of watching, you know. But I think I would like to hear, I would be, as a listener, from what you set up, I'd like to hear you come back to that A.
Right.
Because if you were to give us another idea after that B part,
Yeah.
a different one, then we'd be like, what is happening? You know? But but you're right, sort of at the point, like where I would kind of go back for another round, maybe do a little variation, because if it's exactly the same, give them a little surprise in there.
Okay.
Change one or two things on that first A, maybe a chord, maybe a couple notes, maybe a rhythm or something, but use that basic idea. Go from that. Return to that B part at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe another part, and then take it out. You know, I really think you have more than enough to work with here. It wouldn't. Here's the thing you just made me think of. A lot of us kind of think that composing is creating, when I say creating something out of nothing and selling it, this whole title, it's more like you're co-creating with the universe, where all of this stuff is already in existence. Really what you're doing is reorganizing it. You're not creating in a vacuum. You're not, it takes pressure off of you. It comes from somewhere, and I don't know where. It comes from life, you know? I don't know, it's a mysterious and beautiful thing. But some of the things that I'm most proud of, I don't know how I did it. It almost didn't feel like me. It was just some idea that seemed a bit bigger and more important to me, and I just was a vessel that this thing came through. It really does take the pressure off of you, and you have more than enough there of really great material. So listening and remembering. Remember what you did before, and so that you're telling a story. If you imagine that first A part as the character or a certain setting or something, bring it back.
Okay. Yeah.
Change it, transform it a little bit. The retrograde, all of those things are at your disposal. But I think I would maybe one more new idea that pulls something from A or B, maybe
Okay.
both. That new idea could be a combination of little, motives, something, a rhythm, a couple pitches from the A section and the B section, something that makes it go together. And that could be your C section, and then you go out. You take it out with an A or a B, and maybe a tag or something. You're good to go. Yeah, really great. Like, thank you for please, a hand for having the courage to do that, man. And thank you for being ready to go. So, I've talked, that last Clark Terry bit, he mentions not playing everything you know in the first bar, and leaving space. I think being aware of opposites and the forces of opposites is incredibly useful for you. In other words, silence and sound, consonance and dissonance, soft and loud, and all of those things. These are your parameters to work in. It's the zone that you work in. And even if it's by contrast that these things have power and effect on you, when you put something opposite next to the other. That's why in the B section of the Elephant song, it should have felt drastic, because it was all of the pitches that you didn't hear before. All of a sudden hits you with it, and it's like cold bucket of water all of a sudden. Anyway, so I kind of want to keep it moving here and open it up for you to ask me any sort of questions of anything that I haven't really covered, and the things that brought you here today that you were sort of looking for. Is there anything that I haven't even touched on yet that you would like some more information about, that you think I might be able to help you with?
I had a question about using different instruments. How do you make sure they all line up together and stack up so that nothing's muddy or anything like that?
Is it like an orchestration question, or do you mean like a recording?
For example, in the song you just played for us, you had the horns, you had 2 bass guitars, guitar.
It's a good question. It's a good question.
How do you layer them?
Well, imagine things are in space, right? Imagine the entire frequency range is your palette, right? And everything's going to happen within it. Every instrument is going to occupy a certain space. And you're talking about timbre, essentially, right? Like how do you not get them cluttered and muddy and things like that? It has to do with a few things, in my opinion. The range of the instrument. Is it a bass instrument? Usually the lower the instrument, if you have chords that are closely spaced instead of widely spaced, that will give you this sort of muddy quality. Let me give you Zappa as an example. Now, I was very fortunate to be able to look at those scores. And as you know, he was sort of outside of the mainstream, so he taught himself how to do a lot of this stuff. And when you look at some of the scores, he's doing things that you would never dare to do in school. You know, when the first time I looked at this page of 200 Motels, he's got a section where he's got like 4 flutes in parallel minor seconds. It's just a cluster of like, you know, and he'll write them down low in the bassoon. So sometimes you may want it as an effect. I would say be familiar with the instruments and their range, and then just ask yourself, does it sound muddy? And if it's a bad kind of muddy to you, then leave some space. But it really has to do with the context in your ear. So I hope that helps, but it's going to be the physics of the instrument, the type of piece, whether it's soft, loud, fast, all of it. But trust your feeling about it, that if it doesn't sound right to you, try taking some things out. It's okay to remove things. Often, that's another way that I've composed before is start a lot of notes and then just randomly start making space and pulling things away. It's really, you should be playing with it, and there's no wrong answer to it. So, I hope that helps. Was there anyone else that had something to ask? Yeah.
How do you deal with frustration? Like you're composing something, you're working on something for 1 hour. It was hitting you at first, but then you're just not into it anymore.
Thank you for asking that question. I don't want to ramble too much about that, but for me, frustration is just, it's everywhere. Everywhere. I wish it weren't like that. Some days you walk out of the door and you're just like, oh man, it's tough. I have gradually, this is just my solution to it. Frustration is one of those things that can propel you forward. It really can be the fire that pushes you, because you know what you don't like. You know, now I don't know specifically what kind of frustration you're talking about. Is it the writer's block kind of frustration?
Yeah, for example, when you're working on something and you're already like 1 hour working on it, you have a groove, but it's not hitting you anymore.
Yeah. There are a couple things that you can do. Taking a break is good. Like most of you raised your hand and said that you had little fragments of things that were unfinished. I've accumulated about 20 years of those things in folders, right? I have all of these tiny little bits, and basically the idea just ran out. I didn't know what to do next, and I lost the desire to work on it. I think it's normal, personally. The best thing for me to deal with that frustration is to allow that process to happen and really, really cut yourself some slack, and realize that many of us go through this. It's not always, it's not always easy. I always admired Frank Zappa because the man seemed like a faucet. It was just like, boom, you turn it on, brilliance, you know. You're going to be frustrated if you're comparing yourself to that sort of an output. Now, an interesting thing about Zappa is that his hero was Edgar Varese. How many pieces did Edgar Varese write? Not many, you know, about 10 that are still in existence. I mean, he lost a bunch in a fire, but now, so there's a place for all of us in terms of our pace, how much we produce. Take your time, cut yourself slack, take a break from it. That's really some of the best advice that I could give you about it. It's normal to be frustrated, and just stay at it. One day you may find a use for that fragment and know exactly what to do with it. And it's happened to me, and it's been years later. So save it, don't worry about it, and if you've lost that desire to work on it, move on to something else, and then come back.
I was just
Yeah.
going to say that, didn't Gail say something about Frank would always have like 10 different projects kind of laid out?
Yeah.
He, maybe
Yeah.
kind of
It's-
hit his limit with one and then go to the next one.
Absolutely,
and come
absolutely.
back
He was
to it.
surrounded in it, and she had a way of speaking that was just fantastic. But she described it to me one day as like, imagine you're in a blender, and everything is just whizzing around you, the same ingredients in the blender all the time. And you're in the middle of the blender, and you're just going to grab that as it comes by, and grab that as it comes by. But there's a couple things in there that are useful to me. The ingredients in the blender. Let's take that, for example. It might seem counterintuitive to say that limiting yourself will produce results. But really, a limited palette of things done over a long length of time equals style. That's your style. Your habits, the things that you like, all of those ingredients, you don't need to incorporate everything. This is where the frustration comes in for me. I find that most of us are sensitive people, and we'd much rather everyone get along and more than tolerate each other. Sometimes we've tried to accept things into our lives that maybe at first we just you didn't want to, but you tried. And it's good that you tried. But sometimes we try too long. Things are just not working. And for whatever reason, a type of music or something, a movie, it doesn't hit your chemistry the way that you like. And that's okay. I don't believe, and this is, again, just my opinion, that we're designed to really, it's okay not to like stuff. And I would go further in this to say, be aware of the things that you don't like, because when you are overwhelmed and you don't know what to do, the path will emerge as a result of you not wanting to do those other things. I call them orange road cones of life, right? It's like, that's a road cone there, I don't like that, because I can be like that. Like, I'm a frustrated guy a lot of times. I'm cynical, I look around, I'm like, how is that possible? How do they do that? I have to kind of cope with it. So that's just part of how I operate. It's easier often to identify the things that you don't like than the things that you do. So your path will emerge as a result of you having the cones. You'll be like, all right, we'll go this way. And just keep doing it. It's okay. We don't need to be destructive about it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that this type of music shouldn't exist. I'm just saying, if you don't like it, you don't like it. Don't do it. It's important. And as for your point about Frank working on things all the time, I am the same way. And we have these labels that get affixed to us sometimes. Sometimes they're like mental conditions that have labels, right? ADD, we cannot concentrate, and then we're paranoid about, and we beat ourselves up over those things. How can we not have trouble sorting out all of the information in society today? I mean, come on, let's cut ourselves some slack here. We're bombarded with so much information that composition is a process of sorting out all of that stuff. More than anything, it's not creating it. It's like overwhelming to sort it. So Start with the stuff that bugs you and be like, nope, nope, and slowly whittle it away. And then you find, yeah, I really love that. And ask yourself why. Those are your ingredients. What you're left with is your palette. Zappa uses Rembrandt, I think, as an example. He used just a bit of brown in everything. And that's what gave you that Rembrandt kind of look. But you have to stick with it long enough for people to know that it's your style, right? You have to give the listener a chance. That's why repetition comes in. Give them a chance. Think of your audience, too. I'm going to go off on one more tangent. What you described about, I'm going to pull this piece here, I'm working on 10 different things at once. I'd like to say that the process of composing for me, if you imagine a circle, you can come in from any angle. You could come in with a rhythmic idea, and that could be the germ that everything is built from. It could be just notes like it was on this. It could be just timbre. It could be just anything that you think of. The germ of the idea can come in from any angle, from any of those parameters. So it's not like you have a line that you're following. It's like you're on a train and you're building the tracks at the same time. It's just the way it feels. It's just life is happening now. So it's difficult to talk about and difficult to pin down. But it's normal for you to be frustrated, in my opinion, and allow it to happen. Stick with those things long enough for them to develop. And develop is the key word here. Don't change the idea too fast. I've done so much talking, but I do. And since I think this might be useful to you, I'd like to share this with you. One of the biggest experiences that I had that affected me the most in college was with my composition professor. And I got to school and I knew exactly what I wanted to do my freshman year. I wanted to learn, I wanted someone to help me find my voice, my unique voice. Give me the tools, you know. And it took, I wasn't getting it. The third year of school, I'm in a composition class, and there's only 3 of us. And the first assignment was to write 12 bars like Beethoven, in the style of Beethoven. That was the first assignment. And we had studied a little bit, but not enough for me to feel comfortable like Beethoven. So I spend all night composing these 12 bars, and I'm just slaving over it, and I get something that I'm okay with. And I'm like, it's not great, but it's okay, and I'm tired, you know. So I bring it into class the next day, and my professor says, okay, play it. And I was only in functional piano, I couldn't play it. And he got very frustrated, kind of scoffed, you know, and played it. And when he finished, he crossed out with his pen bars 2 through 12. I was crushed, like, and so angry for years after that. like that man was such a big road cone for me in my life. I just couldn't understand how I could make myself that vulnerable to work so hard on something and to get that feeling. I was mortified. 20 years pass, and I'm still thinking about this guy and the lesson that he was trying to teach me. And I get it now. That method was harsh. And I don't recommend it. I don't think it was necessary. But I know now what he was trying to tell me. And that was, you changed ideas too fast. You had this thing that you gave us. It was like, once upon a time, there was a guy. And then in the next measure, I went, once upon a time, there was this thing. It's like I started another story in every measure. because I didn't know how to develop the idea. And maybe his way of showing me that was a bit harsh. Now, it turns out I think he was right. Now all of that has motivated me to be here today, to spend time with people that are interested in those kinds of things, to encourage you, to say that it's really normal. For me, those feelings are normal. The fear of being embarrassed, I mean, come on. We need to just get over it. That's why I'd like to take a bunch of random ingredients, throw it at the wall, you know. It really should feel like this, like you're just playing. It's an experiment. And we're comparing ourselves to all of these greats, and they had their own time and motivation and all of that, and they're not you. So just, you know, it was a painful, painful lesson, but I do think he was right. It took me a long time to admit that. So, you learn how to develop an idea. Don't throw those things away. Don't change them. Give them a chance. Give yourself a chance and hang in there long enough to develop. It's really important, and you will see results, I promise. It's one of Frank Zappa's sayings. You know, the rules are don't stop and also keep going. That's really all you need to do. And if you love it, it's not going to be hard for you. You're never going to stop trying, making music. So enjoy the ride, the scenery, take notes, relax, you know. Really be kind to yourself. There's a balance of being critical and kind. I don't know how to do it. I don't. But a lot of us are in extremes, you know. We beat ourselves up so much because we're comparing ourselves to either other musicians. We're not them. So you should be you and be prepared to take the time to let it happen. Some of us, like myself, it took a long time. I work slow, I'm very deliberate, I think a lot. I want it to feel right. It has to feel right to me in order for me to be happy. And it can take a long time, but it's worth it. And I've managed to get a career out of it, like a modest career out of it, of things that I love to do. So I know it's possible. Anyone else have any questions before I'm going to bring the band out for another round? But yes, Max.
Going on what you just said before, you managed to form a career out of this.
Yep.
Being a bass player aside,
Yep.
can you talk about how you managed to carve out a living as being a composer?
Well, I wouldn't say that I completely make a living as a composer right now. I'm really just getting those opportunities now. And I'm 41, but I know that those opportunities exist. Like I said, it took me a long time because of my particular path. Following your heart is really important. It sounds so cheesy, so corny. It's so true. And really hanging in there, sticking to your guns. You don't have to be mean about it, but something, it's a combination of that and whatever other force guides us through, whatever you believe in. I mean, life is a bit of it's a mystery. It's a lot bigger than us. So your guess is as good as mine as to how this whole thing works. But I've had moments where I've felt like, yeah, I was meant to do this. Yep, some door opened magically for me, and I can't explain it. It's all of those things. I think when I say you're co-creating with the universe, there's nature in here. Like, this is what motivates me, maybe more than being a composer, is being a good human being. A sensitive human being. I'm already sensitive. But knowing how to use that, it's a gift for us. You know, as artists, we're that's what we do. We sense things, we feel things, and then we kind of put it through our filter, and then do the best we can to put it out there. but the truth is we feel things. So all of these things that seem like non-musical things, completely irrelevant, end up being so useful and rewarding. For example, when I write or I compose something or arrange something, one of my goals is that I want people to have a good time. I want them to enjoy their parts. It's like you're an event planner. Imagine throwing a party for all of your friends, and if you knew all of their favorite foods, you could place them out at the right time, and you'd be the man, right? It's a beautiful thing to think about the people that are helping you to make that music. So many times we're just so tunnel vision that an awareness of the other people is huge. And not to mention a technical thing when it comes to orchestrating. If you were to attempt writing something for a large orchestra, whew, right? You have all of these families of instruments, up to 100 plus people on stage. You got to know enough about the oboe and the double reeds and all of those, and what it feels like to play that role. Empathy is one of those things I can't turn off. I'd like to, some days I wish it wouldn't affect me as much. But here we are. You know, you just kind of do the best you can. Be honest. If you don't, particularly if you don't like something, that's one of the things that I tend to push. Because I find it useful for me. I don't want to carry those feelings of frustration. It may be fuel and it may motivate me, but ultimately it causes you grief and pain. You know? So you can use that and channel it into a piece of music. It's like energy. You store this kind of energy. Maybe it's tension, frustration, joy, whatever it is. All of those things at once. And that ultimately goes into the page or what you're doing. Now that energy can be used for all kinds of other things. Like you can go and punch the bag. You can go work out and get rid of it. You can go watch a movie. You can go talk to people and get rid of it. But for me, because it's like fuel, I sort of contain it for a while. I don't know if it's good or bad, honestly. I don't do it to torture myself. It's because I find that this stuff in a bottle ends up being useful to me later in life and when I'm making art. It connects me to real life. To me, the greatest stuff has this awareness, this sensitivity that we're all together. That nature is so much bigger and powerful than us that if we're so consumed with our egos and what we're doing, it just seems arrogant, you know? It just seems stupid. You're missing out. You're missing out with other people. It feels so good to play with other people when you really are on board for the same thing. It's one of the greatest feelings in the world. Music is truly magical that way. I can't explain all of it. I don't know how it works, but it's like you have little musical symbols that resonate with people, and then it does magical things to them. And they give it back to you, right? If we're having a good show and the audience is just like throwing it back at you, ooh, it's beautiful stuff. Don't forget about it. Be that event planner that's trying to, you can't make everybody happy. But if we're talking about your friends, those moments do make me happy. But there are times where there's something else to say, where I would like to challenge people a lot. I'm a Zappa fan, you know? He challenged and was critical of everything in a way that really turns a lot of people off, especially today where it's just so much to be worried about, scared of, if you choose to, that it's, music's one of those things that brings people together, and I have a hard time separating the person from the art sometimes. I'm curious about how you all feel about this. When there's an artist that you like, that you hear about something that they do that you don't like, does it affect their music to you? How many people would you say, like, out there, do you know what I'm saying? Like, you love their music, then you hear they do something like a jerk, and suddenly it changes the way their music's. Yeah?
Like R. Kelly?
I don't know. Yes, I mean, we don't need to really call names out of it. I have a hard time with it, and I don't know why. I hear people very strongly say, "Oh, it's art," and the person is completely different. Without saying names, I'm going to say Prince, because he's one of the names that had come up a few times when I would talk to people about this. And I'd known some people that worked for him, and they had a tough experience. The discussion was like, well, it's separate from his music. It's separate from his music. I don't know. It's an open-ended question. I don't necessarily expect an answer. But for me, the person and the art, there's a connection in there. I admire the person as much as I admire what they make. So that's just my take on it. Other people may see it as like there's a goal, and the goal is to write great music, and if I'm a jerk and I stomp on people in the process or hurt their feelings, whatever, then it's okay, because it's a means to an end. I don't know how I feel about that. I like the idea of us having fun together and being good to each other. But sometimes we got to be critical. Like that's. I certainly have my moments where I'm like, I don't like what you're doing to me right now, and I'm not afraid to vocalize it. So I urge you to do the same. So, any other questions before I'm going to send us off here with the band, please? Would the band please come back out? Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for staying. I'll be hanging out a little bit after if you'd like to chat about a little more. But thank you so much to the band and for Berkeley for having me and for all of you for coming. Please feel free to hang and chat after.
Whenever you guys are ready, so okay. So 1, 2, 3, B flat.
Cuesta, Daniel Sky, Zishi Yui, and Anastasia and Loli. Back over here. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.